December 1941. Somewhere in the North Atlantic, the temperature is 20 degrees below freezing. Salt spray turns to ice the moment it touches skin. A lone merchant ship, the British freighter SS Siamese Prince Asterisk, limps along at 9 knots, her hull groaning under a full load of tanks, aircraft parts, and high-octane fuel bound for Liverpool. Her crew of 42 men know they are being hunted. They just don't know how close the hunter already is. Beneath them, barely 30 meters down, a German-type WWII U-boat, U-571, glides like a shark. Inside the pressure hull, the air is thick with diesel fumes, sweat, and fear. The commander, Captain Lieutenant Gustav Siemens, peers through the attack periscope. His voice is calm, almost bored. Range 1,000 meters, bearing 090. She's zigzagging, but not fast enough. He lowers the periscope, turns to his crew, and gives the order that will echo across the ocean for the next 4 years. A torpedo lows. A shudder, a hiss of compressed air. 4 G7E electric torpedoes streak toward the surface. On the bridge of Asterisk Siamese Prince Asterisk, the lookout spots the white wakes too late. Torpedoes hard left, hard left. The helm spins, engines scream. Then the ocean erupts. One torpedo slams into the engine room, the second into the forward hold. In less than 90 seconds, the ship is gone, ripped open, burning, sinking beneath black water. Only 8 men make it into a lifeboat. The rest vanish with the ship. U-571 never surfaces. She simply turns south and disappears into the depths. That single attack was not an isolated incident. It was the opening move in the longest, deadliest campaign of the Second World War, the Battle of the Atlantic. This is the story of how Adolf Hitler's U-boats came within a hair's breadth of starving Britain into submission, and how ordinary sailors, scientists, and codebreakers in freezing convoy escort ships fought back from the edge of defeat. We begin in 1939, when the world still believed submarines were weapons of the weak, useful for coastal defense, maybe a raid or two, but never decisive. Grand Admiral Karl Donitz disagreed. Even before the war began, Donitz had spent years obsessed with one idea, the wolfpack. Small groups of U-boats, 3, 5, sometimes 20, would operate together, directed by radio from shore. They would find a convoy, shadow it silently for hours or days, then strike all at once under cover of darkness. Surface ships, he argued, could never react fast enough. He needed only 300 U-boats to bring Britain to her knees. In September 1939, he had fewer than 60. Most were small Type II canoes fit only for the Baltic. It should have been impossible. But Donitz had something no one else did: time, patience, and an enemy that refused to take submarines seriously. U-30, commanded by Fritz Julius Lemp, is on her first war patrol off the Scottish coast. At 9:40 p.m., Lemp spots a large passenger liner steaming without escort, lights blazing, because the captain believes neutral markings will protect him. The ship is the Asterisk Athenia Asterisk, carrying 1,103 civilians, including 300 Americans. Lemp mistakes her for an armed merchant cruiser. He fires 2 torpedoes. One hits. Athenia sinks with 112 souls, 28 of them children. The propaganda fallout is immediate. Goebbels screams that the British sank their own ship to drag America into war. Churchill, now First Lord of the Admiralty, knows the truth within hours. His reaction is chillingly simple. Henceforth, treat every U-boat as a pirate. No warnings, no mercy. And so the rules of civilized war died in the first week. But the real terror began in the spring of 1940, what the U-boat men would later call Die glückliche Zeit, the happy time. With France fallen and Norway occupied, U-boats now had bases on the Atlantic coast: Lorient, Brest, La Pallice, Bordeaux. No longer did they have to thread the dangerous North Sea and British-controlled waters around Scotland. They sailed straight out into the open ocean, refueled, rearmed, and hunted. June to October 1940 saw slaughter on a scale no one had imagined possible. U-99, under the legendary Otto Kretschmer, the tonnage king, sank 8 ships in a single patrol. Gunther Preen in U-47 slipped into Scapa Flow and sank the battleship Royal Oak at anchor. 14,000 tons gone in minutes, 835 British sailors dead. Joachim Schepke, Helmut Rosenbaum, Engelbert Endras, names that became nightmares to Allied merchant captains. The numbers are almost unbelievable. In the last 6 months of 1940, U-boats sank 403 ships, over 2 million tons of shipping. For every U-boat lost, usually to bad weather or accident, Britain lost 30 merchant ships. Sailors called the North Atlantic the graveyard. Survivors of sinkings rarely lasted more than a few minutes in winter water. Hypothermia killed faster than drowning. Lifeboats were often machine-gunned, though both sides would later deny it. Neutral ships were torpedoed without warning. Hospital ships painted white with giant red crosses were sent to the bottom. And still the convoys sailed, because Britain was an island and islands die without trade. Winston Churchill later wrote, "The only thing that ever really frightened me during the war was the U-boat peril." By early 1941, Britain had 6 weeks of grain left, 2 weeks of oil. A map on the wall is covered in red pins, each pin a ship lost. The pins cluster like bloodstains west of Ireland, in the air gap where land-based planes could not reach. This 600-mile-wide killing zone became known as Torpedo Alley. Churchill demanded action. He created the Western Approaches Command in Liverpool under Admiral Sir Percy Noble, then later the bulldog-like Admiral Sir Max Horton, a former submariner himself who knew every trick in the book. Their first moves were desperate. Arm merchant ships with ancient 4-inch guns manned by half-trained teenagers. Paint dazzle camouflage that made speed and heading impossible to judge. Order zigzagging, blackouts, radio silence. None of it worked against a determined wolfpack. Convoy in sight, grid BD 3441, 42 ships, 4 escorts and shadowing. That single message, sent in Enigma code, would change everything. But in 1941, Britain could not yet read it. Instead, the Admiralty fell back on the oldest naval tactic in history, the convoy. Group slow, vulnerable ships together. Surround them with destroyers, corvettes, trawlers, anything that floated and carried a depth charge. Force the U-boat to attack the escorts first. It sounded logical. In practice, it was suicide. Take Conv HX-126 in May 1941. 45 merchant ships, escorted by just 7 warships. U-110 under Fritz Julius Lemp, the same man who sank Athenia *, found them. Within 48 hours, 9 ships were gone. Then something extraordinary happened. On May 9, 1941, the destroyer HMS Bulldog and the corvette HMS Aubritia depth-charged U-110 to the surface. Lemp ordered abandon ship. He stood on the bridge, pistol in hand, making sure his men got off, then went down with his boat. But the British boarding party, led by Sub-Lieutenant David Barmy, rowed across in a whaler under fire from the U-boat's deck gun. What they found inside would shorten the war by years. Barmy's party discovered code books, charts, and most crucially, an Enigma machine complete with its daily settings intact. They stuffed everything into potato sacks and rowed back through exploding depth charges as U-110 sank beneath them. The capture of U-110 was kept secret for decades. Even Churchill didn't know the full details until after the war. But the material reached Bletchley Park, and the codebreakers now had a fighting chance. Still, in the summer of 1941, no one in the convoys knew help was coming. 58 ships, only 5 escorts. Donitz threw 14 U-boats into the attack. In 4 nights, 16 merchant ships and 1 escort were sunk. Survivors floated for days in open boats. 1 life raft carried 20 men. After a week, only 2 were still alive, driven mad by thirst, drinking seawater and blood. The Canadian corvette HMCS Wetaskiwin rescued a German sailor from U-501. When asked why they fired on lifeboats, he replied simply, "We were ordered to leave no witnesses." By the end of 1941, Britain stood on the brink. Then, on December 7, Japan attacked Pearl Harbor. 4 days later, Hitler declared war on the United States. For Donitz, it was the opportunity of a lifetime. He immediately launched Operation Drumbeat, Paukenschlag, the attack on America's east coast. American cities still blazed their lights at night. Merchant ships sailed alone, silhouetted against boardwalks and neon signs. U-boat commanders called it the second happy time. Some skippers fired so many torpedoes they ran out and resorted to deck guns, shelling tankers in full view of vacationers on the Florida beaches. In January 1942 alone, U-boats sank 62 ships off America, over 300,000 tons. Oil slicks washed up on the beaches of North Carolina. Bodies too. Reinhard Hardegen in U-123 sailed right up to New York Harbor, counted the lights of Manhattan, and torpedoed 3 tankers before breakfast. American Admiral Ernest King, bitterly anti-British and convinced convoys were a British obsession, refused to institute blackouts or convoys for months. The carnage continued. It seemed nothing could stop the U-boats. But across the ocean, in freezing escort ships and secret huts at Bletchley Park, something was stirring. The hunted were learning how to hunt back. The wolfpack ruled the Atlantic. But wolves can be tracked. Wolves can be trapped. And wolves can be killed. What happened next would turn the longest battle of the war into one of history's greatest comebacks. February 1942. A young Canadian midshipman named Geoffrey Hobday stands on the bridge of the Flower-class corvette HMCS Spikenard. It's pitch black, -3 degrees Celsius, and the North Atlantic is throwing 30-foot waves over the bow. He's 19 years old, 3 weeks out of basic training, and he's already seen more death than most men see in a lifetime. Tonight he's trying not to vomit over the voice pipe while the captain screams for more speed. Somewhere out there in the darkness, a wolfpack is closing in on convoy on 67. And the escorts, 6 corvettes and 1 destroyer, are all that stand between 40 merchant ships and the bottom of the ocean. That distant bloom of fire is the tanker Empire Amethyst *, 16,000 tons of aviation spirit. She burns for 90 seconds and then simply disappears, taking 47 men with her. Spikenard alters course toward the flames, searching for survivors. She never makes it. At 03:14, 2 torpedoes from U-136 rip into her starboard side. Geoffrey Hobday is thrown against the compass binnacle. The lights die. Water, black and ice-cold, floods the bridge. Only 12 of her crew of 85 ever see daylight again. That same night, 4 more ships go down. Convoy on 67 loses 6 merchants and 1 escort in 8 hours. It is one of the worst single convoy disasters of the war. And yet, something is different now. The U-boat commanders notice it first. Their attacks are no longer going cleanly. Escorts are reacting faster. ASDIC pings are sharper, more accurate. Depth charges are exploding closer, sometimes too close. And every now and then, a U-boat simply vanishes without a distress call. They blame bad luck. They blame the weather. They have no idea that, for the first time since 1939, the hunters are becoming the hunted. A chain-smoking mathematician named Alan Turing stares at a tangle of wires and rotors. Beside him, a former schoolteacher turned code breaker, Joan Clark, is scribbling on a scrap of paper. They have just succeeded in something the Germans believed impossible. They have broken the four-rotor naval Enigma. On 1 February 1942, Donitz had introduced the new M4 machine with an extra rotor, codenamed Shark by the Allies. For 10 months, 10 black months, British codebreakers were blind. U-boats changed cipher daily, sometimes twice daily. Convoys sailed into ambushes they could not see coming. Over 1,500 ships were lost in 1942 alone. Those 10 months almost cost the Allies the war. But in December 1942, the cipher cracked wide open again. Suddenly, the Admiralty knew where every wolfpack was gathering before the U-boats themselves did. Convoy routing officers in Liverpool started steering ships around danger the way a chess master moves a knight. U-boat commanders began to report the strangest thing. Convoys were simply gone. Vanished into thin air. Convoy reported yesterday in grid AK-55. Have searched entire area, nothing, request instructions. Donitz began to suspect a spy. He ordered investigations, loyalty checks, even arrested his own staff. He never once imagined his precious Enigma had been betrayed. But intelligence alone does not win battles. You still have to fight them. And in 1943, the Royal Navy, the Royal Canadian Navy, and eventually the US Navy began to give the escorts the tools they had begged for since 1939. The little ship now carries a Type 271 centimetric radar, small enough to fit on a corvette's mast, accurate enough to pick up a periscope at 4 miles. She has Hedgehog, a mortar that fires 24 bombs in a circular pattern ahead of the ship, so she never loses ASDIC contact. She has a brand new 4-inch gun forward, twin Oerlikons amidships, and enough depth charges to turn the sea white. Most importantly, she is no longer alone. The escort groups are growing. 6 ships become 10. 10 become 16. Destroyers return from the Mediterranean. New frigates, bigger, faster, purpose-built, slide down the ways in Canadian and British yards every week. And overhead, something new appears. Very long-range Liberators, B-24 bombers fitted with extra fuel tanks and lay lights that can turn night into noon over a surfacing U-boat. The air gap is closing. The first sign that the tide has truly turned comes in March 1943 with Conv HX-229 and its sister Conv SC-122. 40 ships in HX-229, 51 in SC-122. Donitz throws 44 U-boats into the largest wolfpack attack of the entire war. For 4 days, the North Atlantic becomes a battlefield 300 miles wide. 21 merchant ships are sunk, over 140,000 tons. Bodies, wreckage, and oil stretch in a trail 200 miles long. But the cost to Germany is staggering. 5 U-boats are destroyed. Another 7 are so badly damaged they limp home and never sail again. The escorts fight like demons. The destroyer HMS Harvester rams U-444, then is torpedoed herself and sinks with all but 12 of her crew. Her sister ship *Akron stays on station, depth-charging U-boat after U-boat until her barrels glow red. When the convoys finally reach Liverpool, the Admiralty does something unprecedented. They send a signal to every escort captain that simply reads, "Well fought, the worst is over." Donitz reads the intercepted signal and flies into a rage. He refuses to believe it. But the numbers do not lie. In May 1943, the month that will forever be known as Black May, Germany loses 41 U-boats. 41, more than one a day. Some are bombed from the air. Some are crushed by depth charges. Some simply disappear, their pressure hulls imploded by the sea itself. One of those was U-192. Her last radio message, sent in clear because the cipher clerks were already dead. AM surrounded, attacked by aircraft and destroyers, we are finished, Heil Hitler. The transmission ends in static. On May 24, 1943, Grand Admiral Donitz makes the hardest decision of his life. He withdraws every U-boat from the North Atlantic. The longest battle of the Second World War is, for all practical purposes, over. But victory did not feel like victory to the men who lived it. Of the 39,000 German sailors who served in U-boats, 28,000 never came home. A mortality rate of 72%, higher than any other branch of any army in the war. Of the 85,000 Allied merchant seamen who sailed the Atlantic convoys, over 30,000 lie in unmarked grave beneath the waves. They have no tombs, no parades, no medals. Only a small bronze badge, a silver ship on a blue and white ribbon that few people today even recognize. And yet without them there would have been no D-Day, no liberation of Europe, no victory. A battered convoy steams in at dawn. Tugs sound their sirens. Crowds line the docks, silent, not cheering. They have seen too many empty berths. One ship, the elderly freighter Manchester Port Asterisk, limps in with her bow blown off, kept afloat only by the timber she carries. Her captain, 62-year-old James Cairn, has not slept in 9 days. When the pilot boat comes alongside, he simply hands over a scrap of paper. On it he has written a single line. All ships accounted for. No losses. For the first time in 4 years, a convoy has crossed the Atlantic untouched. The wolfpacks were broken. The sea lanes were open. Britain would not starve. But the war was far from over. Donitz still had hundreds of U-boats, newer, faster, fitted with snorkels that let them run diesels submerged. He still believed the wonder weapons, the Type XXI electro boats, would turn the tide again. He was wrong. The final act was yet to come. An act of vengeance, of new technology, and of young men in small ships who refused to lose twice. Summer 1944. The war in Europe is entering its final year, yet beneath the grey swells of the Atlantic something strange is happening. The U-boats are back. Not in the great wolfpacks of old, but singly, silently, stubbornly. They no longer howl across the airwaves. They creep on the surface only at night, a thin pipe poking above the waves, sucking air into diesel engines while the boat itself stays hidden. The Germans call it the snorkel. The British crews call it the devil's breathing tube. Either way, it changes everything again. Donitz has not given up. He has simply changed the game. In the flickering light of welding torches, a new generation of U-boat men are learning their craft. They are younger than the old aces, many barely 18. Their commanders are survivors, hardened, bitter, and convinced that the next throw of the dice will bring victory. They have been promised miracles, acoustic torpedoes that home in on propeller noise, pressure-proof hulls that can dive to 300 meters, revolutionary type XXI boats that can outrun a destroyer on the surface and stay underwater for weeks. The first of these new weapons reached the fleet in the spring of 1944. And for a brief, terrifying moment, it looks as though Donitz might have been right all along. While the greatest invasion fleet in history steams toward Normandy, two U-boats slip out of Brest, U-621 and U-953. Their orders are simple: attack the invasion anchorage at all costs. They carry the new T-5 Zornkönig acoustic torpedo, nicknamed the Gnat by the Allies, designed to chase the cavitating propellers of fast escorts. At 05:12 on the morning of 7 June, the destroyer USS Nelson is screening the American beachhead off Utah when her sonar operator hears something impossible: a torpedo running straight at them, getting louder. The captain throws the helm hard over, but the Gnat follows the turn. The explosion tears the stern off. Nelson sinks in 7 minutes. 31 American sailors die on the first morning after D-Day. In the next 10 days, the new U-boats draw blood again and again. The frigate HMS Morn is blown in half. The destroyer HMS Bickerton loses her bow. Even the old battleship HMS Warspite *, bombarding shore positions, is badly damaged by a gnat that locks onto her churning screws. For a few weeks, the Allied naval commanders are genuinely frightened. Admiral Ramsay writes in his diary, "If the enemy can sustain this rate of loss, the entire invasion could be placed in jeopardy. But the miracle weapons have a fatal flaw. They are arriving far too late, in far too few numbers, and into a sea that is no longer empty." By mid-1944, the Bay of Biscay is the most dangerous stretch of water on Earth for a U-boat. Every inlet, every river mouth is watched by radar. Coastal Command has 500 aircraft dedicated to nothing but anti-submarine warfare. Liberators, Sunderlands, Wellingtons, Mosquitoes, even American privateers and Catalinas loaned under Lend-Lease. They fly in overlapping patterns, day and night, rain or shine. When a snorkel head breaks the surface, a radar operator 50 miles away sees it. Within minutes, rockets and depth charges are raining down. The U-boat men start calling the bay the Valley of Death. One pilot, a New Zealander named Terry de Angelis, flying a Liberator of 224 Squadron, becomes a legend. In 3 weeks, he sinks 4 U-boats, single-handedly accounting for over 200 German dead. His aircraft, serial KH-127, is painted with a grinning demon and the words, "The Witch." German radio propaganda offers 10,000 Reichsmarks for his head. The new type XXI boats, the true wonder weapons, never make a difference. Only 2 ever reach operational status before the war ends: U-2511 under Adalbert Schnee and U-3008. Schnee actually gets within firing range of the British cruiser HMS Norfolk in May 1945. He lines up a perfect shot, then realizes the war is already over. He surfaces, salutes the cruiser, and sails home. The rest of the Type XXIs are bombed in their yards, scuttled in the rush to escape, or seized intact by advancing Allied armies. Grand Admiral Donitz, now Führer of a Reich that exists only on paper, broadcasts his last order to the U-boat arm: "Cease fire, scuttle your boats, save your crews." Operation Regenbogen, Rainbow, begins. Across Norway, Denmark, and northern Germany, U-boat captains open the sea cocks and vent the tanks. Some obey, some refuse. Captain Lieutenant Heinrich Timm of U-3525 takes his boat out into the Kattegat, lines the crew on deck, and sings the Deutschlandlied as the water closes over them. Others surrender. In Loch Ryan, Scotland, and Lissahealy, Northern Ireland, long lines of grey hulls fly the white flag of capitulation. British and American officers boarding them for the first time are stunned by what they find. Teenage boys with hollow eyes, boats that stink of diesel and unwashed bodies, logs that record patrol after patrol with no sinkings, only endless depth charge attacks and the names of comrades who never came back. The final reckoning is merciless. Of the 1,162 U-boats built during the war, 830 were lost in combat or scuttled. Only 154 were surrendered intact. The rest were scrapped or used for target practice. 39,000 men served in the U-boat arm. 28,000 died. 5,000 were taken prisoner. Fewer than 6,000 lived to walk on German soil again. No arm of any service on any side paid a higher price. They called themselves the Grey Wolves. They believed they were fighting a clean war, a duel of skill and courage beneath the waves. Many of them were brave beyond imagining. Some were monsters who machine-gunned survivors. Most were simply young men who obeyed orders and died far from home. On the other side, the escort sailors, British, Canadian, Norwegian, Free French, Polish, American, fought a war few people noticed and fewer still thanked them for. They grew old before their time, deafened by engines, haunted by the faces of men they could not save. In the end, the Battle of the Atlantic was not won by any single invention, any one hero, or any decisive clash. It was won by persistence, by code breakers who refused to sleep, by shipyard workers who built corvettes faster than U-boats could sink them, by aircrew who flew until their hands bled from frostbite, by merchant seamen who went back to sea again and again, knowing the odds, and by small ships, ugly, slow, freezing cold little ships, that simply would not let the convoys die. Churchill called it the dominator of all our future. He was right. Without victory in the Atlantic, there could have been no victory anywhere else. The wolfpacks are gone now. The sea has taken them all, hunter and hunted alike. But if you sail the western approaches on a February night, when the wind is from the northwest and the water is black as oil, some say you can still hear it. A faint rhythmic hiss, like something breathing beneath the waves. Fade to black. The Battle of the Atlantic is over. The convoys sail on.